You guys okay?
Yep.
Sounds great.
Okay. Well, hi everyone, and welcome to Ask and Wonder, the show that brings Christians and skeptics together to talk about the big questions in life. I'm very excited about this conversation, and I've said it before, I get excited with all my conversations, but that's what it is. I just love talking about these things and figure out other thinkers' thoughts and rationality and how they approach life and reality. So today's topic is called, or we have named it, "What do you mean by nonsense?" And for this conversation, I've invited two guest friends, secular thinkers, an atheist, Eliiot, and Landon. How are you guys?
Oh,
Doing
great.
good. How are you?
Good. It's very nice to have you back in the show. All conversations I've had with you, I've enjoyed. I've been challenged, and you gave me reasons to keep exploring and challenging my worldview. So I'm very thankful for you.
Thank you for having me back on.
So before we start, oh yeah. So before we start the conversation, just wanted to let you know, if you're interested, if you would like to connect with the show, you can send an email to askandwondernashville@gmail.com. And you can also go to the website, askandwonder.com, if you guys have any questions, and know that this show is going to become also a podcast episode. And for those of you who live in Nashville, I'm very excited to let you know that in 2021, if everything gets back to normal, I'm very excited to bring some live events in our city. I'm very excited about that. So I hope that happens and the vaccine is out and we're just more calm and to get to be together, and spend time together. Okay, well, so before we go to that, I just want to know a little bit about you guys. Landon, how are you? And how's
I'm
everything
good.
going in your life?
Pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah?
How about you?
Everything is going really well. Everything
Excellent.
is going well.
Yeah. I mean, all things considered, right?
Yeah.
Been a tough year overall, but yeah, not too bad. Yeah.
Has this year been extra hard on you, Landon, and your work and family and all of that?
Honestly, not really, if I'm being honest.
Okay.
I work from home, so it hasn't really affected that much.
Okay.
But yeah, it's not been too bad.
Yeah,
Definitely compared to
that's
other
interesting.
people and what a lot of people are going through out there. I
Oh
can't
yeah.
complain
Oh
too
yeah.
much. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
What about you, Eliiot?
Yeah, man. Just making it as best we all can. In the just like Landon said, in the good circumstances that a lot of us find ourselves in. We're there and we're waking up every morning and we're going to bed and we're all healthy and that's just fantastic. Heck yeah, I want to go out to the bar and hang out with my buddies and hug them all and but we'll get back to that, man. We'll
Yeah.
get back to that. Maybe
Yeah.
after those live Ask and Wonder events in 2021. So
That would be fun. That would be fun. Okay, well, so some of the viewers know you already, but I would like to start the conversation since it's going to be going around the topic of Christian and skeptic conversations. I would like to start asking you the question that I ask always, and then I'll share a little bit about me as well. So I'll start with you, Landon. Have you always been an atheist, or in the past you were a believer in any religions?
I don't think I was ever really a deep, very committed believer. The
Uh-huh.
thing with me is I never really studied religion that much.
Mm.
Um, and when I started to, I became not a believer at all, basically. So, I mean, I told you before, I can sum it up to one word, and that would be study. I just started studying things, and um, I found the history of Christianity um, unbelievable, its claims, and every other religion too. And so I mean, and it's a topic I can get into and never, talk all day about it. 'Cause there's so many things that don't make sense, and I know this is going to be about nonsense. So,
Yeah.
I definitely find what to me seems to be like a lot of nonsense, and I don't use that word lightly either. You know,
Okay.
I don't think that we can know anything 100%, you know, with 100% certainty anyway. So, you know, be slow to use that word, but I do think that there are a lot of things that I would definitely call nonsense.
That is
Yeah,
that is good that you mentioned that, because that's one of the, you know, the multi-layered uses of this word, and the
yeah,
facts that you just shared with us that you actually don't use the word lightly, that's going to help contextualize the conversation really well.
yeah,
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. And what about
absolutely.
you, Eliot? Oh, you want to say something else, Landon?
Oh, no, no, go ahead.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Eliot.
Yeah. Like I said last time on here, there is definitely a little bit longer of a story regarding, you know, me catching a particularly weird illness when I was just born and not being able to be baptized. So actually choosing to get baptized at the age of like 8. And so that was a big deal. There was a period of my time, a period of time in my life definitively where every single thing that anybody that's currently a believer describes or says they've experienced because of this reason or that. I mean, I was right there. I ultimately just kind of stopped caring as much, didn't really put as much focus on it somewhere around, you know, 15, 16-ish. And then it wasn't until a few years later that I really started delving into philosophies and definitions and understandings and really started taking the label atheist very actively. And yeah, absolutely. I often will still hear every so often somebody will say like, well, I just don't use atheist because a lot of people think it's bad, and it's like, well, yeah, brother, that's why you use the term, man. Show you're a good person to everybody else out there, just like all of us heathens are.
Mhm.
So
That's interesting. So yeah, just thank you for sharing that, Elliot. My case was I was raised Catholic, but then when I was 12, I abandoned the faith. And then, but of course, I've always liked delving into the deep questions in life. And even though I considered myself an atheist, I wasn't close to, you know, I've never been close to the existence of something else, you know. But of course, definitely not any of the religions that I was familiar with. And then I had the opportunity to meet wonderful people that opened the conversation again with me about God. And actually, something interesting, probably not, I wouldn't say the opposite, but something let's say non-analogous to what happened to you, Landon. I actually started exploring philosophy and science, and specifically the philosophy of mathematics a little bit. And then I started being open to, again, to, you know, a little bit first with metaphysics, and then what happens in the world, and recognizing that there's something wrong with human beings. That's of course, this is talking the way I understand the world at this moment. So yeah, and definitely when I read the Sermon of the Mount, I got to the conclusion, yeah, if I no matter which person would actually follow this or would say this, I would follow a person that would say these things. But then when I put everything together and the evidence of the empty tomb and the resurrection and the starting of the Christian movement in the first century, it was very powerful. So that was kind of my transition. So
Can I
now
ask
that
you a
we have,
question?
oh yes,
Why were you an atheist to begin with?
an
Before you,
atheist.
yeah,
So, yeah, so that's a good question, Landon. When I was 13 in my Catholic school, which, by the way, what I'm going to say about this school doesn't, it cannot encompass all Catholic schools. It's just my experience. All my question, I have always a lots of questions. So my questions were not well received, and they didn't like that I asked questions. And I was 12 or 13, I think I was. And then the facts that people were not open to have these conversations, and they were actually at the same time telling me, no, but you need to believe in God and all of that. So my critical thinking wasn't as developed it is today, which I'm not saying that it's incredibly developed. I'm just saying that I can notice that I'm able to figure out ideas better. So I said, oh, so this is believing in God. So I don't want to know anything about this, you know.
So you knew people that you didn't like, and you didn't like how they treated you, and that determined your belief. Is that what you're saying?
Well, when I was 12. I mean, at that moment, there was something in particular, not about the treatment, because the treatment wasn't bad. For me, the fact that people don't want to talk about the deep questions in life, Landon, it doesn't matter. Religion, non-religious, it doesn't. I don't mind. That conversation to me is so important, and it brings so many commonalities in humanity. When I see people that are able to go through life without having just one conversation about anything, you know, we could talk about death. We don't even have to talk about God, like death. What is this? Why is there something rather than whatever, you know?
Yep.
So when I saw that from the mentors or the teachers and the priests that were teaching me, while at the same time they were claiming that they were following God and all of this, that was just hard for me. And of course, at that moment, I couldn't distinguish the fact that you can say that you follow God, but you need to distinguish that from God himself. So I couldn't uh, separate both. So I just put them together and say, okay, I don't care about this anymore. So that's kind of the way it happens, you know. So then my first question, and the topic is, what do you mean by nonsense? So in the conversations with Christians and skeptics, you guys are well versed in these conversations. And one of the things that I always like asking with my guests, both Christians and skeptics, is when talking about Christianity in your case, or when talking about atheism, from my case, there's always a question that is very interesting to me. And of course, the question for you would be related to Christianity. So when you guys think about Christianity as a whole, actually, if possible, beyond what people say about it, just as the idea, you know, kind of approaching it in a little bit of a Platonic way. When you think about the idea, do you think that the idea is somewhat reasonable? Is it a far-fetched idea, or is it complete nonsense or irrational? And to start with this question, I'll actually answer what I think atheism is. When I approach the conversation, I actually think atheism is actually very reasonable. I mean, it's a reasonable stance. I understand how a person can actually not believe in God. I do. I would say that when talking about all the evidence, or actually not, let's not call it evidence, because that kind of frames the situation towards a particular reality. But just by looking around, it is hard for me. I would put it this way: it is hard for me to understand how a person could actually look around the universe, and the more we understand it, get to the conclusion of, actually, I know that there's nothing else. It's just this, and there's nothing else. You know, I wouldn't call that nonsense, but that is very hard for me to understand. So that is my stand. So you guys know, go ahead with the first question, which is, when you guys think about Christianity as a whole, is it reasonable? Is it a far-fetched idea? Is it irrational or nonsense, or is it perhaps something else?
Yeah, I'll jump on real quick, because I do think Landon, you know, the first thing he said made a good, you know, first kind of flag for where we should go, which is just a real quick definition of
Yep.
nonsense, because I personally subscribe to two, and one of which definitively is in that not spoken lightly category.
Mm.
And that is the one that is really trying to make a fundamental claim about the things that we're doing. If somebody comes up to you and writes 1 + 1 = fish, it is fair to say that that's nonsense in a critical way. Now that example that I gave right there, though, is the other definition of nonsense that I think very much has a place in our daily life. And that's more of a kind of playful silliness that we all kind of know isn't real to begin with. I mean, this is the Lewis Carroll, I'm pretty sure it's in Through the Looking Glass, where the Hatter says, if I had a world, everything would be nonsense. Everything would be what it isn't, and everything that it wasn't would be what it is. You know, something silly like that, and that's just to be playful with it. And I think there is a good use of that too in these types of discussions. But yeah, I do subscribe to the fact that a lot of religious claims ultimately fall flat on their fundamental basis. And this is where I can insert that serious term of nonsense. And it just literally means it doesn't follow logically, right? That's really all that's saying right there. And there are definitely aspects of various religious claims that do fall into that category. Fortunately or unfortunately for a lot of us non-believers, there are other more basic things that are being claimed that do have more of a solid grounding, and that's why we keep having these discussions, right? There are some aspects to religious beliefs that do have a strand of truth. A lot of times the folks like me will claim that we can just find all of those good things through other means, and we don't need that extra baggage, you know. So that I think it's good to have, you know, the two different types, the understanding. Again, I'm a big fan of the playful type of nonsense, but you know, I mean.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Eliiot. What about you, Landon?
I don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
Regarding God, you know, that's a separate question, right? You asked about Christianity specifically.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's nonsense to say that there might be something that you could call a God. But if it looked like what the God of Christianity, I think I would not. I think that that's nonsense. I think it's I mean, and I don't know if we want to, you know, how nice we want to be or what language we use.
No. So I would love for you to be yourself.
Okay.
So definitely be yourself, Landon.
So I think the God of the Bible anyway is really in many other versions. It's like it's an anthropomorphic projection of human ignorance and fears, born of a time when we didn't really know anything, and what were people gonna, how were they gonna explain things but what they saw, and use what they saw, like people making things and fathers and kings and or the strong entities in charge, you know, things like that. But there could be, you know, maybe something that you could call a god. I mean, I don't know. I mean, people have, you know, wildly different versions of God too. You know, if we want to go with a something like Spinoza, which is essentially the universe is God, Spinoza, Einstein. I think that's more plausible. I mean, definitely the universe exists, right? But I don't see any need to use the word God because it has so much baggage, you know. But if you want to say that the universe is God, and when people say that they look at nature and they say, you know, some agent had to have made that, you know, some conscious agent. Why? You know, I mean, people underestimate nature. Like, look at everything it does. You know, so why can't nature be why does it have to be this conscious thing like us? You know, because as far as we know, you know, there is no consciousness without a brain or without a physical substrate, right? And so for me, like, so we want to look at we want to proportion our beliefs to the evidence, and we want to look at what's common and what's not common, kind of, I guess, is a way to phrase it.
Okay.
So like, okay, so if you tell me that you have a cat, I'm gonna believe you because, you know, I know that cats exist and that people exist and people have cats, right? But if you tell me that your cat is like some super magic flying extra dimensional being, you know, that can read my mind and that, you know, they can fabricate rainbows or something like that.
Be cool cat.
Adding to that. And so I'm going to be a lot more skeptical, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so when we look at Christianity, there are all kinds of claims in there, like, you know, the spirit world and all kinds of miracles and things that, you know, don't mesh with what we see. And it asserts a whole nother like realm, the supernatural, right?
Yeah.
That so what we talk about, inference of the best explanation. Why would you infer a whole other realm, you know, that's never been the explanation for anything that we have been able to, you know, understand up to now? You know, everything up to now has been just mindless physics. It's been, you know, that's why when people say, like, I've had people, theists say to me, like, well, you don't believe in God, but you believe in aliens, right? Well, I say that it's likely there's something out there because of how big the universe is, you know,
Yeah.
how old it is, right?
Yeah.
But we know life exists in the universe, and we know that the universe exists.
Yeah.
So there's nothing, you know, we exist. We're in the universe. There's a bunch of planets out there, right? So that's
Yeah,
very
definitely.
different than saying there's some entity that's completely different from anything we've ever been able to see or measure or, you know,
And
identify coherently. Go ahead.
correct me on this, Landon, if I'm wrong, but because I believe in aliens, but I think we're both using the term believe there in the sense of the probability has been undeniably demonstrated by various factors, right?
I'm definitely talking
Like,
about probability when it comes to aliens.
yeah, right. So like
Definitely,
when you and I say we believe in aliens, that definition of believe really is a different definition, I would say, than
I'm very skeptical that
God,
aliens
right?
have been here and they've been abducting
Yeah.
people, and you know, and the ancient
Yeah.
alien theory it's pretty fascinating, but doesn't have very good
Yeah.
evidence behind it. So
Yeah, it's fun,
but
definitely.
I
it's
think it's more
nonsense.
plausible than Christianity, though, you know,
Oh,
because of what I just
I'd
said.
love to see that.
Yeah, there is definitely the fact that there can be life in different parts of the universe. In terms of probability and mathematics, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it really does. So
Don't you think that makes nonsense out of Christianity though? Because like, if Christianity is true and there's so many planets and there may be some life approaching ours in complexity, I mean, does God go from planet to planet, you know,
well,
sacrificing himself to himself in their image? You know,
well, we can talk about probabilities a lot and potential worlds and possible worlds, but since that is not today's topic, let's just focus on that. That actually is an interesting question. If I could encounter someone, an entity that is conscious of its own life, and I could have a conversation with this entity or this humanoid or whatever, definitely my first question wouldn't be, hey, what do you eat, or how do you breathe, or my first question would be, how do you exist, what do you think about the world, but definitely perhaps we can talk about the hypotheses, panspermia and all of that in another video. But you
like
mentioned something.
Eliot was saying, like somebody says, what'd you say, Eliot? 2 + 2 = fish? Is
Fish.
that what
Yeah,
you said?
like fish. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, obviously things like that, or somebody like Donald Trump, you know, that lies incessantly, and we can demonstrate that he's lying, and he says, no, I didn't say that. We can demonstrate that he did. Things
Yeah.
like that I would classify as nonsense. You know, logical fallacies, you're kind of going that direction.
Mhm.
Things that are just incoherent, inconsistent, contradict physics, things that need like endless excuses and interpretations. Things like that too, I would say. Nonsense. Most
Okay.
probably. Yeah.
So you mentioned, because I started definitely because these conversations usually we talk with Christians and skeptics, and definitely it would be interesting, in fact, to explore one day if atheism looks the same in different parts of the world, because the atheism that appears or comes out of an Hindu country, where Hinduism is the religion, I think the taste or the nature of that atheism is going to be different. But just focusing now on the idea of God, actually, I like that, because that's the essential idea, you know. Then the interpretations and the way to understand God, that is interesting too. I was thinking the other day about this. Of course, you guys know about the design argument that William Paley put together. And definitely for centuries, we've been talking about this, and we have said, you know, oh, this doesn't work anymore. This doesn't make any sense because we're discovering the way things work and all of this. But then I go to, and I really want to explore this with you. I go to the initial idea, which is this actually rational that a person would come to a conclusion like this? And I keep coming to the same conclusion, which is I think it is rational. Let me explain to you why. By the way, seeing, let's say, just to follow the argument of, actually wouldn't use the clock, but just seeing what we see around and all our knowledge that we have of the universe, and rationalize it in order to get to the conclusion that it was designed. That wouldn't take me directly to the Bible. It would take me to an entity that put everything into motion. And then there's another step there. But a human being is born, appears on Earth, starts looking around, starts analyzing things, recognizing patterns, and during the last few centuries, we starts recognizing that the world is set in motions with laws that can be recognized with a specific language that we have discovered, which is the language of mathematics. And we know this, we see this, and we acknowledge this because we have a mind. And then also with our mind, we are kind of able, we see it all around, so we can create things, or we can just put together things in order to create new things. We had this conversation before, whether human beings actually create things or just are original in putting things together. But like the fact that it's only a mind, as far as we know at this moment, it's only a mind, the thing that is capable of doing everything that we're doing and recognizing and actually predicting things that happen beyond our present time, and also predicting things that happened in the past. Do you think that thought, Landon and Eliiot, do you think that the fact that a person could come to the conclusion that there's actually a mind which or who created everything is actually irrational? Just that thought. And I don't want to push you to say, oh no, be very, very honest. I really have a hard time thinking how that can be seriously irrational. But I would like to hear your thoughts. Perhaps it is. What do you think?
Landon, you want to go ahead, brother, or I'll
Go ahead.
in?
I'm going to gather my thoughts.
Yeah. So again, we come back to the understanding of the definition for irrational, and the wonderful yet also frustrating thing about being human and language in general is that it's complicated and that it always has lots of different layers to it. And there is a colloquial sense of irrational. But this one is a little bit more negative in its connotation, right? Like somebody just does something stupid and you're like, you irrational jerk. But again, there is a fundamental criticism if you're using it in that fashion. And just the same for me when I say nonsense, really where I'm going is as far fundamentally back as the laws of logic. There are three presuppositions we seem to need, and we don't have a fantastic explanation for them, but we all seem to operate with them, and there seems to be no better answer. As long as you only have three presuppositions, you are rational. The moment you get to a conclusion that requires a fourth presupposition, you are irrational, because that doesn't follow the fundamentals of logic. And for me, it's just that simple. And the problem with the logical fallacies, right, is that for a really long time, a lot of people used those arguments and they won. And then eventually a bunch of other people got together and they said, hey, wait a second, just because you've counted 99 white swans doesn't mean they're all white. And then somebody goes, no, that's irrational. And they go, nope. So A equals A does not equal A. There is no middle ground. Here's where this leads you. And that's the thing. The logical fallacies feel right for all intents and purposes. When you use one of those things, you're not doing it consciously. And that's the point. It's a blind spot in our reasoning that is really hard to suss out a lot of times, especially when the argument is really well crafted, you know. But all of us are subject to these fallacies. And again, if you fall prey to these fallacies, you are irrational in one sense of the word. Again, it doesn't mean that one can't think great thoughts or be very correct in, you know, many of the things that they experience, or you know, think about the world. It doesn't mean that one can't be a brilliant PhD. I mean, in fact, there are many very, very intelligent individuals that believe all types of things. But again, yes, in the most critical sense, just the same as nonsense for me, these terms really do apply directly to logic, directly to the idea of, hey man, unfortunately, there's a stumbling block along the way in your argument, and we have to go back and fix that. The conclusion may be right, but if our steps getting to the conclusion aren't right, then honestly, it unfortunately doesn't matter. We have to have the right steps, because we have to show not only sufficiency but necessity, and that's always deeply important. I hear so many believers of all stripes say things like, you know, well, you can't answer this with atheism, which atheism doesn't, in all fairness, it doesn't really answer a lot. It just answers, do you have this belief? But no, that's fine, we can't. But all you've done is shown that your answer is sufficient. You haven't shown the necessity of it. And the necessity is deeply, deeply important. We need to show that the car doesn't work fundamentally without the engine. Otherwise, it's just kind of like, okay, who cares?
Okay, that is interesting. Landon, do you have any thoughts about this?
Whether or not a God is rational or a mind is rational.
How if a person just come into this conclusion, and by the way, I'm not approaching the conversation with, you know, oh, let's actually look at this argument and they just the prep. No, I'm just talking about people kind of making this conclusion out of their own experience. And I would say also in 2020, with all the information that we have about the universe and the way it works at the supra level and the quantum level, the aesthetics of ontology, which is why the universe looks the way it does, with all this information, with our experience, with our mind, with our consciousness, is it actually, beside Christianity, it is actually nonsensical for you, Landon, that someone could come to the conclusion that there can be something or someone or a mind?
No, I understand. You keep talking and I have all these thoughts popping in my head and I'm trying not to forget, you know, and choose which way to go. So I can understand why somebody would think that. I can understand why people thought that. But you know, when you look at science, when you look at the scientists and the you know, like Newton and Galileo, can't say Galileo, etc. You know, you can understand back then science was in a different place, right? And people, you know, they pretty much had to be Christians, or they would, you know, risk their life. Look at, you know, Giordano Bruno got burned.
Unfortunately,
But you know, you look at now today, the way science has progressed in 400 or 500 years, the majority of elite scientists are atheists, or at least they're some type of non-theist. I think there's a reason for that. You know, these are the people that are most in touch with reality, you know, with studying the universe. And they don't find it convincing. So you keep talking about, you know, with us today in the modern world and everything that we know, and look at quantum physics. I mean, I don't understand how quantum physics is something that you would use to support a God, because you go back to Aristotle, you know, his prime mover, he actually had like, I think 17 prime movers, but we used to think that things needed to have a push or something that started them, right? And that's not the case anymore. Like if you look at at the most basic level, a physicist like Sean Carroll will tell you that causes they're not in the description of reality at the most fundamental level. Like what is the most fundamental thing is like quantum fields, basically, and they vibrate and they become particles, things like that. And even the time, a linear time, even possibly the past and the future, they're not really there on the quantum level. There's all kinds of quantum weirdness. So to use that to prop up God, I mean, it just seems to me that, at least for a lot of people, what they do is they put their God glasses on, and they can interpret absolutely anything to support, like on the moral or societal level. Like if somebody thinks society's gotten way better, a theist can say, yeah, see, God is guiding us to this point. If you say society has gotten worse, people have gotten worse, then a theist can say, yeah, because we have original sin and we're damned and look, of course, so, and that's a problem when that's an impediment to getting out the truth, objectively, just wherever it leads, without any predetermined conclusion. You know what I mean?
That is yes. So that is interesting, and definitely.
Before I forget, a mind creating the universe. So it doesn't make sense to me because, like, what is this mind doing forever? Is it like alone and bored? Does it have company? What space does it exist in? Like, it's just so many things that just don't make sense to me. And it makes more sense that a universe
that is true. Yeah, that is true. First. That is definitely true.
Yeah, and people say God is eternal. Why can't the universe be eternal? The universe is and you talk to a physicist like Alan Guth, who came up with the inflationary theory, right?
Yeah.
He thinks that the universe is likely eternal, and many others do also. So why not? It's simpler than a God, right? And we have the example of something like evolution, natural selection, that shows that, unlike some miracle God just magically pooping things into existence, that complexity can come from simplicity, right? Without any kind of conscious, we know natural selection is not purposeful. Like it's blind. It's completely blind. So that doesn't work. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So
I know there are theists that do say like theistic evolution and whatnot, but
okay.
Yeah.
So let me say something about that, because that was interesting. You guys mentioned a few things, especially you, Landon. Yeah, I mean, it would be fun to have time to tackle all of those questions. But I'll just be honest. When it comes to the conversation of science, I think that is when I feel the most invited to actually use the word nonsense. That is very interesting to me. And the reason why this happens to me is because, I mean, we can talk about quantum physics, but let's just talk about science as a thing, right? This is a way to approach reality in a systematic way. In order to approach reality in a systematic way, you need to have first reality. You have to have reality with the nature of being describable, and you need to have also entities able to describe that reality. And then when we're discovering things in science, which is beautiful, which is actually amazing, and when we're discovering things because these things are there. We haven't put those things there. Those things are just there because, I mean, the explanation in science doesn't give us any explanation about why things are the way they are, which is I call it.
Can I interrupt? I'm sorry.
But yeah, sure. It's because
you're talking about I've heard you say this before, that science doesn't really tell us what things are. They just,
Yeah.
So what?
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like,
so yeah. But what is not an answer? You see, so what is not an answer? That's not the type of answer that you try to. When you think about God, Landon, you were saying, how is it possible that it lives, or he lives alone, and all of this, those questions are not applied when we actually mold and talk about energy, for example. We know what it does. We can mathematically predict the things that they do, but then we don't ask the
We
questions
can
about the
predict things,
ontology.
yeah, unlike God. You can't use God to
Oh,
predict anything, as far as I
okay,
know.
so yeah, you take it to that side of the conversation, but it doesn't help to what we're talking right now, which
Okay.
is, so what is good? So what? I know, but then that is not what we're talking about, because in your skepticism, this level of skepticism should be kind of used at any level of the things that we use, and we know. I mean, this is something that we know objectively. We don't create energy. It is out there, and we just have the capacity to interact with it, to mold it and use it and describe things. So do you think that so what is enough, and how do you approach that, Landon? And then Eliot, if you want to add something to this.
Oh yeah, I've got a few things, but definitely Landon. Go ahead, brother.
When I say so what, I don't mean that I don't care. I mean
Oh, I
that
know, I know, I
I
know.
mean that, we would like to know. Most of us would like to know as much as we can. That's kind of in our nature, right? Um, but all I'm saying is that science has built our whole world. The efficacy and validity of science is the reason we're able to talk right now. It's the reason why a lot of people are alive, and the reason that we went to the moon and we have robots going around on Mars, taking photographs, and on and on and on and on. So before science, we were stuck in one place. We had religion making claims and never backing them up and never finding anything out. And, just they had to, and people say, like, I know this is kind of a diverting away from the topic a little bit, but like people say we have a God hole shape, or a God sized hole in our heart or something like that, or that we're by our nature that we're religious people. All you got to look at is how people had to force their religion on people so often. People had to force people to go to church. They had to force them to worship the right God, be in the right religion. And we have many examples of religions, from Buddhist sects to the Charvaka, which is an ancient Indian atheistic sect that don't have they're fine. They've never had any conception of a deity at all.
Mhm.
Um, so anyway, but that's going off a little bit, but
It does,
uh,
because I could say to that, Landon, I could say to that many people say I'm an atheist without exploring the 4,200 religions that there are in the world. So
sure,
it's
yeah,
like, so that's
but
what I'm saying. Those generalizations are just very always. You need to be
but
careful
do you
with
know
that.
the generalization that I see that's pretty accurate?
Yeah.
The majority of people are born in a religion and they never study it very much.
Mm.
Their
Sure.
geography determines religion most often, and the people that are
I agree.
atheists
I
tend
agree.
to be people, not always, but especially compared with religious people and the majority of people, they're people that have studied it and they've come to a conclusion, and they've had to do that because it's not something they inherited. And
Mm.
it's not something that most people subscribe to. It's kind of a philosophical position that they get to. And there are some people that, they just say, I just don't like this, or I just don't believe it, or I mean, yeah, granted. But in my experience, I don't mean my own personal people I know, I mean everything. you know People that are atheists, go to universities if you want to find the most atheists, a lot of atheists. Go to professors and scientists, and you know the people that are sophisticated theists are the minority of theists, as far as I can see. And the vast
Mm.
majority of people, it's just something that you know generation after generation, they've inherited that. And you can see kind of why, you know but
Well, it makes sense to me. It makes sense to me because in order to have, I mean, I'm talking as a Christian, but in order to have a relationship with God, you don't have to be smart to know a lot about quantum physics. So, but definitely something that you mentioned that is important is, yeah, people need to keep asking questions. The genetic fallacy can be applied to the secular world too. I'm from Spain, and when I go there, definitely it works. People don't believe in God there anymore. So they're born in a society where they're not going to be exploring any religious claims whatsoever. So it could kind of play both ways. But
yeah.
Eliot, why don't you
Yeah,
tell us a little bit about everything?
there's
Or if,
there's there's a whole bunch, of course,
yeah.
to hit. I think um, two things real quick. I do want to say, yeah, I mean, what Landon said regarding the tried and true validity of the scientific method and the fundamental laws of logic. I know he didn't say that last part specifically, but it's entailed in it. Those things have time and time again shown themselves to be right, and it's hard to combat that, right? It's hard to say, like, well, I don't know if science really does a good job, and then it's like, okay, but we just flew on an airplane and we're Skyping and we just ordered a coffee with our phone, and so I don't know, maybe it is right in a lot of places, and maybe there are some places that it needs to get better. I'd also say, though, that um, while I do agree wholeheartedly, Landon, in the concept, where you're born really does dictate what you're ultimately gonna be raised in, and so forth. At the same time, I want to say, and just kind of do a little shout out for your channel. You published your book with Atheist Republic. Is that Armin Navabi's
Yeah.
channel?
Yeah, I have several conversations I did with him on my channel also.
Yeah. See, Armin Navabi is a great example, right? A man that cannot go back to his home country because of the fact that he absolutely was able to change his mind on some thoughts and couldn't go back, right? And it's tragic that that's the case. And there is, I mean, there's hours and weeks even of discussions that can be had on all the terrible things that have happened in history with various worldviews and all the terrible things happening now. Believe me, there is a very unfortunate movement in the United States right now, in my opinion. But I think there's a couple of good points on nonsense that I've got written down here. I'm always scribbling ridiculous amounts of stuff. But one thing Pedro said earlier that I really enjoyed. You said there were three things to kind of basically get us to here, and let me know if I'm wrong on this, but you said the first one was reality. Then we need that reality to be describable. Then we need agents that can interpret and describe that reality. Did I get those right?
Yes.
Okay. So here's kind of what stuck in my head here, which is, first off, is there actually three? Is it just two things? So, like, if we agree that reality exists, isn't reality describable in and of the sense that we agree that it exists? And if it's already describable, then the fact that agents that exist in that reality can describe it, it seems to not be as mystifying anymore to me. If we agree that, which I'll say. Another little plug for Landon's channel, Aaron Raw. He's talking with Landon. He has some wonderful stuff on this. There was a debate he did on Modern Day Debate, I believe, with James, who's a great guy as well. But Aaron Raw made the point that oftentimes when he gets into these debates, one of the things that he likes to do at the very beginning, before they even get on the stage, is he just goes up to the other person and he just says, "Hey, do we both agree reality is real? Are we both living in this world together, or are we just brains in a vat? Where's your thought on that?" Because ultimately, a lot of times, what ends up having to become the case, like I know Saitan Bruggencate is pretty famous for this, where he says, like, how do you know tomorrow is going to be the same as today or yesterday? And that's fine and dandy, and we can play with those thoughts. But the problem is, all of the evidence really does seem to indicate that, yeah, without question, yes. Every time I do something in which gravity will pull some object back to Earth, it seems to keep doing it. And I would love a live stream of somebody just taking a paper clip and just dropping it to the ground, just literally infinite amount of times.
Yeah, Eliiot, I don't think you were. I would say we have faith that the sun's gonna come up tomorrow, or miraculously that the Earth is gonna keep turning. Yeah, but
exactly.
Yeah, like a religious person say, I have faith in this thing. No, we have
Right.
justified expectation based on a lot of evidence, but we're not dogmatically saying, "Oh, I know this and I have faith, and you can never change my faith." Not at all.
And I think you and I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but I think honestly, a lot of the people that I see that speak on this side of these topics, a lot of times I hear them express this kind of this like, hey, yeah, show me a ghost. I'd love to see a ghost. I mean, personally, I'd love to see a zombie or a unicorn or a leprechaun or the tooth
Yeah.
fairy, Bigfoot. I'd love to see any of that. And really, especially with the claims that are made fundamentally in religions. Look, if if God is real and he created all of this and I'm going to be punished for eternity, and Jesus Christ was his shining example, and I need to freaking know that,
You're
right?
tempting me
So
to get into a lot of the problems with Christianity, and I don't think that's necessarily.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
you get my point, which is
Yeah.
simply just
For
I
the
mean, I think,
viewers, I just say, yeah, they're just so that these claims are not just passing around. Just said, and then, from my perspective, there are no problems with Christianity. But let's continue because these
yeah,
claims
and
are just.
yeah, and I apologize. I don't mean to just dismiss so
Yeah, no,
easily a
that's
lot of
okay. That's
things.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of us that are on the non-religious side or a skeptical side, whatever label, um, that really would love to see this stuff. I mean, I actually know people that hunt ghosts. Now, they have told me they have found things, and I have never seen the evidence for it, but they told me that they have found things. And personally, I would love to see a ghost, man. The problem seems to be that we don't have any evidence of it. It doesn't seem to be around us. And as long as that's the case, I will firmly plant my flag on, hey, we just can't go there yet.
Okay.
Well,
So
Neil
let me
deGrasse
ask
Tyson
you,
has a.
give me a second.
Okay.
Just want to ask you. Of course, I'll give you time to say whatever you want to say. But usually the shows are last for 1 hour. But since we are three guests, and two guests, me, and we are, I think, enjoying this conversation. Are you guys okay with extending this conversation for 30 more minutes?
I got as much time as needed, but I don't
Okay.
want to hold you
Okay.
guys. So
Let's do 30 more minutes. Landon, please go ahead.
I was going to say that Neil deGrasse Tyson was asked, what do you say to somebody that said they talked to a ghost or something like that? And he said, what you should do next time is tell that person to get some specific details from that ghost or that vision or whatever, like about where they are, how old they are, like what they see, or like people that have like out of body, like they're in the hospital and they think they're floating above themselves, things like that. Let place something up on a shelf, something specific, and see if they can identify it, things like that. Let's get some specific data, right, and not just these general vague things and feelings, and let's test this stuff. I think that's a good way to go.
Let me ask you a question. Do you guys think it is, I don't know if I should say logical or fair. Sometimes my English fails me, but do you
I
think it
speak
is
Spanish,
actually,
by the way, so if you want to.
yeah.
and I'm trying to learn. So
Yeah, perhaps the next time we can do it in Spanish.
Oh my God, I'm so far away from that.
No, that is
Probably
okay.
don't speak as well as you, but yeah.
No, that is okay. So, do you think it's actually, let's say, actually fair? Do you think it's fair to equate ghost with the existence of God? Do you think it's fair to equate that?
I think in a sense, but I think in the video, when one of the previous videos you and I did, we kind of hashed this out a little bit, where I said that I felt there was kind of just one strand of that supernatural aspect, and you kind of felt it was different, or vice versa, or whatever. I think there are many claims out there that just fall under the category of like supernatural or mysterious or vague, or I mean, honestly, even scientists do this. Anytime you see the word dark in front of anything that a real cool scientist just put out, it means they don't understand it as much as they want,
Mm-hmm.
literally. Dark
Yeah.
matter, dark energy, black holes. It's like, okay, so it's there, but it's still fuzzy.
There is, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, for me personally, I put all supernatural type stuff, anything that is outside of the world around us that we can demonstrate and that we can show logically works, anything outside of that, I put in the same group. But I don't do so, or at least my intention is not that leprechauns are the same thing as Jesus, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's just to say that for me, both of them are claims about the world that we don't have good reason to believe from my viewpoint.
That is interesting because that when I hear conversations with great debaters and thinkers, and for example, some of them talk about this, I think it's called the spaghetti monster. I don't know. I don't know this obsession with Italian food when building analogies for all of this, but I love Italian food. But for example, I can talk just a little bit about the things that I know of. So beyond which I accept, but well, beyond the claims of Jesus being God and all of this, we can actually trace back Christianity to a real moment in history with evidence, with a person that people called Jesus and also actually Christ. And then we can see how this movement, let's start with the presupposition that it was even, we don't know if it's true or not, but people started talking about it. They were not gaining anything from it. And that has developed to points where, for example, in today's world, 2000 years ago, which by the way, Christianity is not a Western religion. When people say that, that is very interesting to me. It's an Eastern religion, which I'm from Spain and I live in the United States. And here I am talking with you guys about this. So people just making, I don't know how much money per month and giving money to poor because the poor people, because they think that this is right. These things keep going, hospitals being built, things, I'm not building a case for Christianity right now. I'm trying to be as objective as I can. That's the way I'm approaching this conversation. So that's why when I hear like equating ghosts with Christianity in this sense, or God, I kind of go, is that fair? I don't think it is. What do you think, Landon?
When it comes to God, I'm not really, I'm not sure, because God is a hypothesis for the entire universe. And like leprechauns and fairies and unicorns and ghosts are like little things within the universe.
Mm,
Um, I'm not sure. I
mm,
think there's a lot of truth to what Eliiot said. They are just, they're outside of the realm of the natural world in that same way. So they're just assertions or hypotheses that people have or make. And so I'm not sure.
okay.
Christianity, though, I think is definitely the you're talking about a Holy Ghost and a Trinity and Holy Ghost, you know, ghost. So there are all kinds of things in there, curing sickness with mud and spit, saying that sickness is caused by demons, when they didn't
Yeah,
know
that's
about
it.
microorganisms. Yeah, I think all that kind of stuff is on par, definitely.
Mhm.
You were talking about the historicity of Jesus in the Christian history, right?
Mhm.
Um, I recommend people go to my channel and check out my interview with David Fitzgerald, who's an author, kind of an expert. He's a mythicist, and I'm kind of agnostic about whether a guy existed or not. I'm not sure, but there's really good arguments against the historicity of Jesus. Richard Carey, I just had him on too, but we didn't talk about that topic. But when you look at the prior, dying and rising gods, and how all the gospel writers and Paul, they were educated Hellenistic Greek writers, and they definitely knew about like Herodotus and other other myths, other writers, that they were definitely exposed to this stuff. And we have like Justin Martyr in the 150 CE talking about like, and others talking about like the devil did this stuff in advance to trick people, and that we what you say about the sons of Jupiter, we say about Jesus, we're not saying anything different. Things like that. And again, when I look at
That,
Christian history, it's so, I mean, it doesn't look like a divinely guided history at all. I mean, it's pretty horrible. And I mean, it's a lot of it's done by force. And you look at Christianity did not explode until it got power with the Roman emperors in the 4th century. But that's delving into, I think, a whole nother topic. But
yeah,
you
it
brought it
is.
up, so I thought I just go
No,
ahead.
definitely. Yeah, again, it's just so many claims that yeah, I need to learn how to have these conversations better, because when I hear those claims, because you you do that a lot, you just make claims and just you keep adding them on top of one another, and then we move to another conversation. And it's very interesting, but of course you can do that, but I'm just thinking about how to bring everything
You
together.
made
And
claims too, Pedro. You made them first,
oh yeah,
actually.
no, but
So
and perhaps I do it too. So I'm thinking, I don't actually, if I have done it, I don't want to do it, and
you did
I'll
it
try
first,
not.
man. You just started talking about the historicity of Jesus and how this all goes back to us. I mean, Muhammad, Muslims
No,
have
but
a
I'm
history.
talking, but that's the thing, in the academic world. In the academic world, this topic has been studied. I'm open to be unconvinced.
Oh, the
In the
majority of scholars do think he existed. Yeah, yeah.
oh,
But
and
there's also been a lot of problems with the way they get to those conclusions that have been pointed out too.
but
And the
that is
consensus.
skepticism. That is
Guys,
skepticism.
I'm starting to feel like Chris Wallace over here. Let's
Yeah,
rein it
yeah,
back in.
yeah.
It's hilarious.
No, but that there's the thing is that that same skepticism that are using for the academic world to acknowledge that that is that way. I think you're not as skeptic as all the claims that seems to support your atheism. So that's what I'm saying. I don't know where to go with this,
I'm
because
skeptical about everything. It doesn't mean I don't accept anything, at least tentatively. Some things I might say. Well, another thing I've heard like apologists say, well, you have to make a decision about whether you accept God or not, or you believe or not at some point. Like, no, you don't. You don't have to at all. I mean, because false knowledge can be way more dangerous and misleading than just ignorance, even. So, no, not really.
definitely. And with the same, I would say, well, apologists could say whatever they want. I mean, we're having, the three of us, a conversation. With the same could be applied to skepticism, meaning where is the line that where skepticism stop and relates to one's life, because that seems to be very inconsistent in the way people live their life without an actual worldview. But again, I say these things, Landon, not because I mean, it just, those claims that you make are very strong, and I need to say something for, at least for the viewers to understand this is not like the conversation is going somewhere.
Some
Because
other claims, and I'm not claiming them out, I'm pointing them out. And I was kind of pointing out what other people said. I wasn't really saying whether I subscribe to them or not. Like talking about mythicists, I just said I'm kind of agnostic about that
yeah,
particular area. But the consensus of scholars, as far as I know, is that, things like the Exodus didn't happen. We've had Jewish archaeologists that wanted to find evidence of that and other things in the Bible not be able to find it. A lot of, I think the consensus is that people like Moses did not exist, the patriarchs did not exist, and they found all kinds of things where things have been spliced together from different eras, and they have like anachronisms, like camels, where they said there's camels when there weren't camels there, things like that. And we can
so
go on and on and on,
what
but
is the evidence? Yeah,
that's their,
tell what we have 20 minutes, but
Well,
again, this is
if I could,
the uncomfortable thing about this, is that I could ask you, just tell me the evidence. People say this and that, but if we go to Eliiot, go ahead, please.
yeah, if I could jump in a little bit on this, because I do think that it's important to make the distinction that when it comes to historical claims, which I'm definitely a lover of history. When it
me
comes
too.
to historical claims, yeah, I know. We evaluate things differently, right? So like I remember reading just very recently, and I'm blanking on the place, but they uncovered some super cool archaeological stuff, and then all of a sudden the archaeologist goes, yeah, they must have done this with it, and they must have done that with it, and a lot of times when we say that stuff, it's kind of like more because along the lines of like, well, it's a bowl and we know what people do with bowls, you know? And so like, we don't have direct evidence of certain things. Again, I mean, I know Pedro, you and I spoke about this last video, I believe, about Socrates. Like, there is stuff out there historically that we've like dug up in the ground, and it's like, hey, look, there was this guy Socrates. But when we continue to investigate that, we ultimately find out that we don't have all the good stuff that we really need to definitively say 100%, like, oh yeah, Socrates lived. But what we do have is we have records from individuals that have been, you know, at least even minutely verified by other individuals, and we come to the conclusion that these people are telling the truth to their best of their ability and all of this stuff. Specifically on like the Israelites from Egypt, that one is particularly interesting, specifically because the Egyptians, as did the Chinese, as did the Mesopotamians, as did the Mayans, I believe, all of them developed writing independently, which is truly fascinating. It's truly incredible to develop writing. You know, creating a language now, while impressive, you know, it can be done. I mean, Klingon is a real language, and so is Elvish.
Are you a Trekkie too?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So
Me
I
too.
mean, yeah, you can definitively study those languages, and they follow, you know, correct patterns. But to create it out of absolute nothing is truly impressive. And I don't know if this is because they created a language or just because they really enjoyed writing, but the Egyptians wrote down basically everything. And there is one glaring reference missing from all of those writings, and it's Israel or Israelites or Hebrews. And so it seems particularly strange that while yes, it doesn't look good for the Egyptian pharaohs, you know, the Hebrews, you know, Moses coming up and saying, screw you, Pharaoh, and taking all his people, they apparently wrote down basically everything else. So it seems weird that this one slight was so egregious to them that they decided not to write it down. But even
you say the same thing for the Romans, by the way. Romans kept
yeah, I mean,
very detailed, you know, records.
Exactly, and it's and I think one of the stories for Jesus's birth is related to like a census that the Roman people wanted to do, and they told
no trace
people,
of it. Yep.
And they said like go back to your hometowns, and why would they do that?
It doesn't really make sense either. Yeah.
But even with all of that, you know, there's still none of the stuff that we dig up in the earth from ancient civilizations is going to tell us whether or not God adheres to the laws of logic, or whether or not the claims made by individuals that believe this do either, right? And that's what's most important for me. Whether or not there is good or bad historical evidence for a global flood, or for Noah being able to put 2 of every kind of animal on the ark, doesn't bug me as much as whether or not there is just logic and truth behind it. And a lot of times when I think of this, what I think of is a question that was posed to me by my physics teacher way back in high school, man. And it was just one of those little brain teasers, you know, like work on this for the first 5 minutes. And oh my gosh, we all worked so freaking hard on this question. And the answer really, really annoyed me at the end. But so the question was, if a mirror reverses left and right, why doesn't it reverse up and down? And we kept thinking about it, and we said, oh man, it's because of quantum this, you know, or, oh man, it's because of refraction and the way that, you know, light does this and it can do that. No, the answer is that the question doesn't make sense to begin with. That's not what a mirror does. It's a misunderstanding of what a mirror is doing. It's not reversing anything. It's simply reflecting. And so that's why it doesn't reverse up and down, is because it doesn't actually reverse left and right. We have to make sure that the questions we're asking also makes sense, right? If we ask a question that doesn't have any logical basis to it to begin with, then we're never going to get a logical answer. Or even if we do, like I said earlier, our steps to that answer will still fundamentally be wrong. And I personally have a problem with that. And I know there are a good few of us out there for sure on all sides that also have a problem with that. And we're just still arguing about, what the heck is right, man. Which is
Eliiot,
why
do you think that the Christian mythology makes sense? I'm not supposed to be asking the question, but
no. I mean, I'm
yeah.
happy to answer as long as Pedro doesn't kick us off.
No, it is okay. It is okay. I wanted to talk about something else, but you can also ask me questions if you want to. Yeah.
I'll be real quick on this. The mythology makes sense in the sense of in the specific framework of the types of people, their historical backgrounds, and the understanding of the world at the time, as does the Quran, as does Hinduism in various forms, as does Judaism. All of these things have their place where, once you put them in this particular context, it's like, But then again, my criticism will always go back to the nonsense that is the logical absolutes. And the moment at which we start claiming things like Vishnu flew around in some cloud-like spaceship, or Jesus was able to rise from the dead, or Mohammed split the moon in half. All of these are wonderful things, but they don't adhere to the laws of logic, and for that they're not.
Presuppositionalists will tell you that logic is this proof of God, right? So
yeah, I hear that, and I've always wanted to ask somebody this. I've always wanted to ask them whether or not their God comes before the logical absolutes or after it. Because if their God comes after the logical absolutes, then he's bound by them and he doesn't exist. But if he comes before, well, then we have a good discussion. But I think most of the time that people are arguing that God comes before the logical absolutes, they're actually ultimately saying that God is adherent to them. Like, for instance, I've heard, I forget who it was, but I heard somebody say one time, they said, oh no, God comes before. And the person responded and said, okay, so could God have made the logical absolutes differently? And they go, well, no. And so therefore God is adherent to those three and he doesn't work in that argument.
Yeah, this is when, for me, I would say you guys are mentioning things that encourage me to think about this, which is, this is the part which is when skepticism becomes not a healthy thing, but a thing one should be a skeptic about. And the reason
about skepticism.
Yeah, well, but here's the thing about this. Because in order, for example, Eliiot, you're mentioning something interesting, logic. We all use it, right? And in order to arrive to a claim, we want to be logical. We want to use, logic, right? The way we understand it. But then when it comes to the skepticism of asking questions about everything and keep asking questions, I just in a funny way, I'll try it. This is kind of like a joke, but Landon said it like the so what. In order to avoid those questions, is just to keep asking questions. What happens?
I didn't say stop asking questions.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Always keep asking questions.
Yes. But then when we get to the questions of, for example, again, I'm sorry that I get to the same points all the time, but for example, when we see we need logic, we need the three basic, we're talking about things. We're talking about things that are specifically shapes. Let's use that verb for the sake of the conversation. In particular ways, we are there so that we can use them, and the system, naming it the universe at this point, the system is working with certain laws. Everything is working perfectly, and then the question still remains: why does the universe look the way it does? I mean, the question is there. And when talking about science and logic and all of this, we talk about, I hear you guys talking about science as and I hear you, but I'm not saying that you're saying that, but I hear it as if like this is the ultimate way to really experience reality. And then people in the past without the scientific method, people
It's the ultimate way
smiled.
to know
But
things
let me
objectively,
finish.
not
Well,
reliably.
objectively, we don't know anything. That's the point. Science doesn't do that either. So that's the point that I'm saying. It's
Well,
just,
saying we don't have absolute knowledge is not the same thing as not having any knowledge. I mean, if we didn't have
I
knowledge,
agree.
reliable, I'm talking about objective, reliable knowledge. It doesn't matter if we don't know the absolute every detail fundamental. We still have a lot of knowledge, and we use it. You know, we
Definitely.
demonstrate that we have valid knowledge.
But that's, I agree with all of that, Landon. But that again leads us to the point of, so what do we do with this type of skepticism? That what are there arbitrary limits to the type of skepticism that we use, right?
I
Meaning,
think
yeah, go ahead.
I think you're going down a good route, and this is I thought I kind of was feeling like I was picking up on it just a minute ago. It kind of almost sounds like we're approaching that same kind of non-religious spirituality that you and Jim Palmer were talking about
Yeah.
on a discussion,
Mm.
and Sam Harris speaks a lot on this, and I think Daniel Dennett does, as well. I'm a big fan of that type of spirituality type thing.
Mm.
I'm a big fan of the idea of like, man, there's this really good fuzzy feeling I get when I look at a sunset, or there's this amazing, incredible, indescribable feeling when you're at a live concert. I mean, hopefully not now, but you get what I'm saying. But those types of wonderful things.
Eliot,
Shouldn't
Oprah
be.
Winfrey says atheists can't have awe and wonder.
Yeah, I've heard a good few people over the years tell me that I can't have those things. And funny enough, I find myself having a little bit better of a time than most of those cats.
Yeah,
Um,
people say, but again, these claims, I mean, we can talk about them. All Christians are stupid. But of course, when I hear that,
oh yeah,
oh, okay,
No,
that's okay. Meaning, but of course, you guys know that, yeah, if we stop and think about those things and take serious all claims, we cannot do that. And so my last question for you, and I'm thankful, by the way, that you guys spent time with me and talked about all of this, is just to wrap up, to finish the conversation. Ultimately, I have asked this question before, but I would like, if possible, for you to give me and give us a final answer. Specifically in the Christian skeptic conversation, which is something that we consume and we're part of in this area of the world, and we do that. How much does the term nonsense apply to both views? Ultimately, when you finish having a conversation with your Christian friends or Christian non-friends or whatever, how much do you think nonsense is playing into this conversation in general? So, Landon, you can go first, and then Eliot.
I'm not sure I understand the question. How much is nonsense, like their claims, or how they're talking to you, or what,
So,
or how they
what
get
I
their
mean.
evidence, or
No, what I mean, Landon, personally, yourself, when you finish these conversations, when you hear these conversations, do you think that in general, these conversations lead somewhere? Do you think that this is all
mm.
nonsense? We should stop talking about these things?
do I think
How,
conversation is nonsense?
not about these topics in particular, about these
Absolutely
Christian
not.
skeptics. Okay, okay,
No, I wouldn't be engaged in it if I thought it was nonsense.
okay.
And people that like to stay in a bubble, they must not care about truth, because how can you know that you have the truth if you're not exposed to
I
all
agree.
the opinions and knowledge you can get, right?
I
You
agree.
know,
Yeah.
you want to know how to analyze them and the proper way, but definitely. And I mean, if we don't have conversation, what do we have?
Mm.
I think Eliiot mentioned Sam Harris. I think he has a quote. Without conversation, what do we have? Violence and war. We have to talk to people that we disagree with. And I think a topic we kind of touched on my last topic episode with you about a secular world, right? Me and Jason Sylvester were talking about, we need to appeal to our common humanity, the things that we have in common in our nature as social beings. We're interconnected, interdependent, and we might have some beliefs that don't mesh, but we don't want the beliefs to control our government. We don't want the beliefs to control, how we deal with people, even if the Bible says go kill people that don't believe in your God and things of that nature. We want to appeal to,
It's just
you
so
know,
unfair. That is so unfair, Landon.
you've got,
Oh man, that is just so unfair, man. Well, continue.
well, it does say that.
Oh man, that is just so unfair.
Okay.
Like,
Well,
yeah, like, I don't know, like, if I talk about, I don't know, the Lord of the Rings and Aragorn saying, let's kill them all, and you took out of context, out of the helm abyss.
oh, the
And
out of context thing. Okay.
oh yeah, of course,
Wow.
because things are not taken out of a vacuum. You should know this because of science.
I read it. I'm not taking it out of context. It's in a context, but it's anyway.
Okay.
Well, hang on.
That wasn't
hang
my
on,
point.
Hang on.
Yeah.
hang on, gentlemen. Because I think, honestly, even right there, I think is a really good example. Because I want to wholeheartedly echo what Landon said regarding, these conversations are not nonsense, right? I truly dislike the phrase, you can't reason somebody out of something they weren't reasoned into. It's been happening for years, and it continues to happen. And my goal in these types of discussions and these types of understandings with people is not to strip people of their spirituality, not to strip people of their religion or their good feelings or any of that. My goal is to have the least amount of the critical nonsense definition and the maximum amount of the nonsense that's fun and fantasy and play and we can all enjoy together. Let's get rid of all of the bad ideas. Let's get rid of all of the things that hurt us as people, and let's have just the best, whatever the hell that is. If that's something to do with empiricism, great. If it's not, great. I'll take whatever the correct answer is. That's what's always most interesting to me. But again, even when these discussions get heated a lot of the times, and I see it happening on everybody's, every time these conversations happen, oftentimes what you still find though is camaraderie and the idea of being in this position, thinking about these things. Truly, I will ponder on the friendship of Antonin Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg for the rest of my life. I never understood it, but they were wonderfully good friends and deeply opposed to each other and deep adversaries when it came to enacting law. And yet there was camaraderie because they both knew that when they went out and they spoke to each other and they formulated decisions and they backed up their understanding, they understood that did matter. That did matter, and it does matter, and it will continue to matter as long as there are crazy folks like the three of us that want to keep getting together and talking, man. So when that stops, be afraid is what I think, when that discussion stops. So
I want to say, thank goodness Christianity doesn't have control of the government anymore, because we, before we had a secular government, we couldn't. I mean, people like me and Eliiot will be burned at the stake, and you might be too, Pedro, because your opinions might be a little too, heterodox for the people in charge.
I'm so scared about two things too, about secular government, and I'm very also excited about the day where people are going to talk about the myth of well-being in 200 years.
Well-being's a myth? Wow.
It's a myth. And with this, you see, those are the claims that, no, that was kind of a joke. Thank you, bye, I'll see you later.
I have a blog that I did where I talk about Christianity being rational, and maybe I can send it to you and you can link it, and maybe we don't have time to go over it. But the whole section of it is going through the mythology, not like Eliiot did, but just looking at it as it is, not in any kind of like what people thought and whether they were rational for their time. But
It's funny. It's
just
funny.
like
It's fun.
human sacrifice or any kind of sacrifice, how does that save somebody? And, you know, God sacrificing himself to save us from himself and things like that. But talking about the logic of it and how does it make sense? But
Yeah.
I guess we don't have
So
time
we
for that.
can
But
definitely. So we can talk about all those things later, and that is actually a very topic that I really like, because again, I read about the history and how monotheism arose, and in the academic world, also the comparison, the analogy with Christianity, with other myths, is so debunked that I'm just interested to hear your thoughts, because I've actually read
that's
about
another
this.
big claim.
It is
Hey, there's
definitely, because
many hours
No, it's
in the
not.
last 3 minutes. In the last 3 minutes, we could make another 5-hour and a half
definitely.
long videos like this,
Definitely.
guys.
Who debunked
But
that?
this
Like,
is this is something. This is something, again, just to take it to I don't know, to make the conversation healthy. This is something that always I find very interesting, how people can come to the hopefully the same evidence and end up going to so different places. So that is something that I usually I get interested in. But well, so Landon and Eliiot, I'm very thankful for you guys, and thank you very much for spending time with me. I love having conversations with you. I'm open if you guys would like to have more conversations in the future. I'm always open to be, part of this and be challenged and challenge others and grow together. And for you that's watching the show, just know that if you want to connect with Ask Wonder, you can send an email to askwondernashville@gmail.com. And you can also listen to this podcast version, and you can go to iTunes or Google Play and look it up. And definitely we'll share links with information about Landon and his book and his YouTube channel, definitely for you to check it out. And definitely, Eliiot, if you would like to share something with us, or some of the things that you mentioned, if you will. No, but if you will, Eliiot, you have a lot. If you would like to expand, you have a lot. So Eliiot, if you would like to expand on any of the ideas that you mentioned, about any articles or things, just let me know and I'll share it with you. And thank you very much for being with us. Thank you, Eliiot and Landon.
thank you.
Always fun.
Okay.